it's unfortunate circumstances that we had to throw this together, but it is one of the ways that we can help as a company, and I can help as an individual, is to bring some of this information out to you guys. So we're absolutely excited to help. Before we get started on the actual content, I want to let you guys know where this information came from. How did I acquire this particular information? Well, a couple of years ago, we put together a CE class on water restoration. We reached out to an expert in the field, Patrick Knapp, who lives down in the Raleigh area, I think technically Wake Forest, in the Wake Forest area. And we interviewed Patrick on what this, how does this work? What do you do? What does it look like? How do you deal with insurance adjusters? Because I've tried to do insurance work in the past. It's a nightmare. I think I hate it worse than foundation work. It's really tough, but I did want to let you guys know. In the CE class, we actually play the recorded interview with Patrick. We're not going to do that this morning. The class goes into so much more information. We are offering that class later this month in its entirety for CE credit as a webinar if you want to watch the entire video. I'll also give you a web link a little bit later on where you can watch the video on your own time and not get CE credit for it, but you'll be able to see Patrick actually talk about all of the issues and everything that we'll go over, but in a lot more detail. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask them. The worst that will happen is I'll say, I don't know. Of course, I would much rather make up an answer. That seems much more fun, but I'll tell you I'm making an answer up if that's the case. So I guess we'll just jump rock and roll. And I know everybody's on a time schedule this morning. Adam's going to go ahead and put the handout in the chat window. If Megan, are you doing that, or did Adam? She's already done. Okay, great. So that's already in there. It was in your email. This has pretty much everything that we'll be talking about today. So feel free to hang on to that, review it, check it out, and I guess let's get started. Should we get started? So the first thing I want to talk about is actual water damage, because most of us will be talking about water damage when we deal with insurance companies. And then we're going to move into and actually talk about the adjusters reports, the suggested strategies to deal with adjusters and negotiate with adjusters. In the handout is a cutout examples of an actual adjusters report from flood damage in the Arden area. So the things we're going to look at are real life examples as we move forward and talk about it. Categories of water, let's talk about that first. Category 1 is clean water. And yeah, great, Adam's on top of it. He's always got that shared up there on the screen. So that's potable water for the most part. Category 2 is going to be gray water. So from your sink, your dishwasher, your laundry machine. And then category 3 is just the worst of the worst. So flood damage that we'll be dealing with right now after Helene is going to be that category 3. That river water, that creek water, it's contaminated, it's going to have sewage in it, it's going to have gas, oil products in it, and who knows what else is going to be in it. So it is the worst type of water to deal with in a flood damage situation. So are there any questions on that? Okay, rocking and rolling. The next thing we do want to touch on really quick are the classes of water damage. Now these items that we're talking about, the categories of water and the classes of water damage, are going to be important if you're dealing with actual water damage in a home or a commercial space. That's why we're reviewing them. They're going to pay out a little bit more when it's worse water, right? And when it's the most severe damage. That's why we wanted to bring this to you. It is important. You can talk to the adjusters about this is category 3 water, and the water damage is going to be the worst water damage that we can consider in most cases. So, but class 1 is going to be water losses only affect a main part of a room. And you guys can go through these. Category 2 is going to be a little bit worse. It's gone up into the walls, into the carpet. Mostly what we're going to be dealing with is jumping all the way down into that category 4. It's the most severe loss of water, which includes wet material, water that has penetrated into the building materials themselves, the wood members, the framing. That's really what we're going to be dealing with because the water sat in it for so long. Are there any questions on classes of water damage? Okay, something else I want you guys to consider when you're looking at these and dealing with your adjusters, you're going to be looking at bonded water damage. Bonded water damage. I'm saying these key terms and phrases because they will help you when you're negotiating with the insurance adjuster or communicating with the insurance adjuster. Bonded water damage is where it has had a chance to seep in, particularly into those low porosity type building materials, such as a slab or such as a 2x6 stud. It's going to take a lot longer for those types of materials to dry out. So that term, again, is bonded water damage. That's going to be a critical term to talk about when you're moving into these homes and businesses looking at the flood damage, because it sat in the home or in the building for an extended period of time and really had an opportunity to be absorbed into the material. Are there questions on any of that? Great. So the vast majority of insurance adjusters out there are going to be using a software called Xactimate. That is by far the industry standard, Xactimate. How many of you guys have ever heard of Xactimate? My guess is almost nobody has heard of Xactimate because it's not construction estimation software, right? It's an adjuster's software. So that makes a really big difference. That's a key term to talk about when you're meeting with your client. Want to make that clear at the very beginning. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is when you're making these negotiations, keep in mind, you should never be negotiating directly with the insurance adjuster. Don't do that. That is going to be the quickest way to get yourself in trouble. Unless you're one of these companies that doesn't do anything but water restoration, like a ServPro type company out there, unless you're one of these types of companies, it's probably going to get you more in trouble than anything else if you're trying to negotiate directly with the adjuster. So just do yourself a favor and stay out of that. By the way, as we go through this, some of the things I want to talk about, adjusters are licensed. They have their very own license, state by state, and we are not adjusters. I'm not a licensed adjuster, and neither are we. So we have to be careful about that boundary when we're talking to our homeowners. Yet we have our own license to deal with. That's going to be really important to consider too, and critical when you start these negotiations. As you're setting up these negotiations and you're moving in, I want you guys to make sure that you're getting your contracts signed with the client, with the homeowner or property owner. Get that signed. Don't be afraid to say, I can't do a free estimate, right? You can't until you really know what's going on, until you can get in there. That is okay too. Make sure that, once again, that your contract is with the client, that your terms are with the client. Your contract really shouldn't change much. It should be pretty much the same thing. It's going to be up to the homeowner to get paid by the insurance adjuster. Your role in this particular situation should be to help communicate and arm the homeowner why your numbers don't match the adjuster's report. Because I guarantee you, it'll be few and far between that those numbers actually look close. The adjusters do have the ability to change the report, to adjust to the report. As Patrick liked to said, you're an adjuster, make an adjustment. So that always kind of cracked me up. You're an adjuster, make an adjustment. So they can do that. They're typically going to give you something that looks like a line item adjuster's report. They don't have to do that either. They actually have the ability to give a bid adjuster's report. They're not going to admit that. They're likely not going to tell you that. Keep in mind, who does the adjuster work for? Right, the adjuster is working for the insurance company. And what are insurance companies, what are they trying to do? Make money. They don't want to pay out. They're trying to mitigate their losses. They want to pay out as little as they possibly can. So do keep that in mind when you're moving into this. The adjuster is representing the insurance company. The insurance company does not want to pay money out. Remember that as you're moving through this process. Your contract is with the client. Your numbers are with the client, and you need to make sure the client is going to be able to pay you. It is okay to get your deposit just like you normally would. It's okay to do your invoicing just like you normally would. The rest of this that we're getting ready to dive deep into is going to be just what to look for, how to equip the client to do the negotiations. Remember, we as the general contractors don't want to do the negotiations unless we're really skilled at dealing with these insurance adjusters. These other companies out there that don't do anything but insurance claims, whether it's water restoration or the roofing company that does roof damage, these guys are really good at this. So it is sometimes to their advantage to negotiate directly with the insurance company because they know all of these key terms. They can talk very informed and very quickly with these adjusters and get the maximum payout. For the rest of us, like myself, I'm not really skilled at all the terms, which is again why we're talking about that bonded water. We're talking about the categories of water damage. We're talking about Xactimate is adjuster software. It's not construction estimating software. That's really why I'm throwing all these terms out. I'm going to mention them several times to make sure you guys get a grasp on it, jot it down, whatever you got to do. Again, it's going to be important when you're talking with the client and the adjuster's report. So before we go any further and really dive into this report, you should never be meeting with the client and letting the client do the talking. I always recommend, and it's the best practice, to meet with the client and the adjuster at the literal kitchen table if it hasn't been flooded. But we need everybody to sit down at the same table. Frequently, the adjuster is going to tell the client that his number or her numbers are correct. I guarantee you, their numbers are not going to match your numbers the vast majority of the time. Your numbers are going to be way up here, and that adjuster's numbers are going to be way down here. And the adjuster is going to tell that client, hey, you know, the contractor doesn't seem to know what they're doing. This is what I do for a living. This is all I do for a living. I know these exact prices, and I don't know what your contractor's telling you, but these are the real numbers. So we do have to be cautious of that. Remember, they are representing the insurance company that doesn't want to pay out. Are there questions on any of that? Okay, let's jump on into let's get down to the nitty-gritty with this. Let's pull up that handout for us there. And make sure I've got my copy pulled up right too so I can follow along with you guys, I guess. There are some things you want to think about when you look at these. Again, bonded water damage, how you're going to dry it out. A moisture meter is going to be critically important. And before we dive deep into looking at this report that's pulled up on the screen, if you don't already have one, I really suggest you get a moisture meter. The insurance agents will typically tell you, and the adjusters will typically tell you, there's a 3-day dry time. And they'll tell you that that is a standard 3-day dry time. That standard does not exist nowhere with any organization, agencies, or any other possibilities other than with the insurance companies. There is no such thing as a 3-day dry time. So you may have to open up portions of the house that had less water damage to check it out. Now, there are going to be many places in the house it's just going to be obvious, and it may even be gutted by the time you get there. But a moisture meter is going to help you make sure that it is indeed dried out, giving you better quality work as the house ages. So making sure it's completely dried out is going to prevent that mold growth within the wall, that mold growth underneath the flooring, that could pop up and have you to come back and do a warranty claim later. So there is no such thing as a 3-day dry time. What you're looking for is the moisture content to drop. You're looking for the moisture content to drop. You can find that moisture content, what all building material has online. I'll make sure I get you guys that website page. I think I've got it written here anyway. Yeah, so iicrc.org will tell you some of this. That's going to be the globally recognized agency that certifies water restoration. So again, you're going to want the building material, actual moisture content that is regulated, and you can refer to that on a case-by-case basis. Moisture meter, cLearn makes a great product. You can check out more of the cLearn products, but you're definitely going to want to have a moisture meter. You may have to have one with the tongs that you can drive into the building material, tap it into a hammer, into the stud, because something like that you just simply can't touch because the surface of the stud may be dry, but the moisture inside the stud could be really wet. So something with a couple of tongs on it, you drive it in, really easy to find. Again, cLearn makes a great one, and that's going to tell you the moisture level of the building material. Questions on any of that? EPA.gov also has information on the moisture in each and every building material. So they will tell you what the moisture content of drywall should be. They'll tell you what the moisture content of a 2x6 stud should be. They're going to tell you what the moisture content of concrete should be. So you can go to the EPA.gov and they'll tell you each and every building material what that moisture content is. Questions on anything? All right, insurance companies are always going to tell you there's 10% profit and 10% overhead. How many people are marking everything up 20%? Right? I don't know many contractors that are still in that 20% range. But as we go through this information and we look at it, that's all they're ever going to give you is a 10% profit and 10% overhead. Well, I'm guessing most of this information, or excuse me, most of the damage you're going to be looking at is also going to be in excess of $40,000. It's going to be a lot of damage that we're dealing with. As we look at the cutout here on page 3 of the handout at the very top, can everybody see that okay? No, next page down. That one right there. May want to zoom in a little bit on that top part for us there, Adam, so everybody can see that easily. Everybody see that okay? Great. And again, you do have the actual handout there for you guys to check out. All right, so we're looking at these estimate totals, and there'll be all kinds of information on this adjuster's report. We just did a snapshot of what was most important to get through to you guys. So first of all, we can all agree that most of this damage is going to be over $40,000. Anything you do that is $40,000 or more requires a building permit. If you are painting the mall and it's going to be $45,000, you are required to get a building permit. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you're doing carpeting in the nursing home, just carpeting and nothing else, and it's going to be $42,000, you are required to get a building permit. Do keep in mind, as of last year, the licensing board has said if you don't get a permit when you should have gotten a permit, you risk losing your license. They can restrict, suspend, or revoke your license if you do not get a building permit. That is fairly new within the past couple of years. Are there any questions on that? All right, I want to say that again to make sure everybody is really clear on this. Anything that is $40,000 or more, it doesn't matter what it is. If it costs $40,000 or more, you are required to have a building permit. Anything that hits $40,000 or more is required to have a licensed general contractor manage the job. So the new cutoff is $40,000 for everything. That's going to be really important to remember as we start to dial into these adjuster reports. Are there questions on that? Once again, if you don't get a permit when you should have gotten a permit, you risk losing your license. Anything $40,000 or more requires a general contractor to oversee and manage. When we talk about overseeing and manage, we talk about that all the money has to go through you. You guys are already familiar with this. If somebody doesn't have workers' comp, you have to provide it. You already know this. If they don't have liability insurance, it comes back on you. If they make a mistake and burn down the house, it's your fault. You're going to face the criminal and civil charges. Even if the electrician did it, he might be in the courtroom right behind you, but your head is going to be on the top chopping block. You face the criminal and civil charges. Is everybody familiar with the differences between criminal and civil charges? Trust me, this actually does relate. Okay, so let's talk about criminal versus civil charges just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Most of us probably remember O.J. Simpson, right? Pretty infamous case. So O.J. Simpson, he was charged with murder. Nicole, and I can't remember the other guy's name. It's been a number of years ago. But in criminal court, they found him innocent, right? Criminal court, they said, nope, O.J. did not commit murder. But who was it? Nicole's family sued him for murder. Civil lawsuit, right? They sued him for murder, and in civil court, they won. They said, yeah, he killed her. Absolutely. What are those differences? Typically, only the government can file criminal charges against you. There's a couple of exceptions in there, but typically think about criminal charges. That could be something along the lines of, speeding ticket, right? Murder, right? Typically, only the government can file criminal charges against you. But civil litigation, anybody can sue anybody for any reason at all. So in criminal court, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Criminal court has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. But civil court has a much lower standard. Civil court has to be a preponderance of evidence. So it simply says most of the evidence has to point there. Doubt doesn't matter. Beyond a doubt doesn't matter. We just have to have a plethora of evidence. That's it. That's all there is. It's a pretty low standard for civil action. If you make a mistake and something goes wrong in the home and somebody is hurt, there's some sort of damage, you could be liable for both criminal and civil liabilities, right? You could go to jail, you could get fined. Case in point, you don't get your building permits, the licensing board can take your license away from you. That would be an example of a criminal enforcement. Civil enforcement, they're suing you because mold popped back up on the walls 6 months later because you didn't have a moisture meter, you didn't make sure it was dried out, and that moisture sat in there and got really seepish and crappy and icky over, 3 or 6 months, and now they're calling you back. You're like, wait a minute, my warranty's over this, that, or the other, and now they're gonna sue you for not drying out the home properly. Once again, there is no 3-day dry time standard. Are there any questions on this so far? All right, I've intentionally left up this example of an adjuster's report on the screen while we talked about that. Letting Adam pull that, zoom back in on that top one for me, Adam. Thanks, man. So I intentionally wanted to have that entire discussion because we know that most of these jobs are going to require a building permit and they're going to, by law, require a licensed general contractor. By the way, the insurance companies are not going to allow the homeowner to declare themselves a general contractor ever. They're never going to let them do that. They're not allowed to. So even though the law can allow the homeowner to be their general contractor, in the case of an insurance claim, that absolutely will never happen. As we look at this adjuster's report, we know that most of these jobs are going to be over $40,000. And at the time that we created this class, it was $30,000, but that estimate has changed. And it doesn't matter because in that far left-hand bottom total, we see a $43,000 number. So then look at all these totals over here, and somebody please show me where the permit fees are listed. Yeah, there's no permit fees listed over there. The adjusters are never going to include permit fees. They're just not going to do it. Yet that is a real number for us. That's a real expense. It's real time. It's real admin time. Somebody's got to pay me to do that, right? Somebody's got to pay for those permit fees. So what I'm suggesting is you want to sit down with the adjuster and the homeowner at the proverbial kitchen table and have this conversation. You're going to have your estimate pulled out. The adjuster's going to have his or her estimate pulled out on the table. You want to say to the homeowner and the adjuster, hey, listen, Mr. Adjuster, I know that you have a license, and I get it, and you're following the law to adhere to your license requirements. But we have a license too. My company has a license too. And it's critically important that I follow the law to protect the homeowner and to protect myself. We've got to do it. The laws are there for consumer protection. That's why they're there. That's why we have to get these permits. You want to say that in front of both parties, the client and the adjuster. Saying it in front of both clients puts the adjuster on the spot. It does it politely, it does it diplomatically, it does it in a fair way, because the homeowner is going to be sitting at the table going, yeah, I do want this to be legal. Yeah, I want this to be done the right way. I want the law and the permits and the inspections to be followed. I want my safety at the top of the list. What we're trying to do here is equip the homeowner to do the negotiation. We want to make sure that that adjuster can't intentionally or unintentionally manipulate the homeowner into believing that they're right, their numbers are right, and your numbers are wrong. That's really what all this comes down to. Making sure that the adjuster knows what you're telling the client and that you're telling the client in front of both parties, once again, equipping that client to fight that adjuster. It's not your job to fight with the adjuster. If you start fighting with the adjuster, I've been through this myself, I've tried to do it myself, you're not going to win. You're just not going to win. If you're one of those ServPro type companies, absolutely those guys are really good at it. For the rest of us, we want everybody at the table together, and we're going to point these things out. Where are my permit fees? Where are they? I have to have them. It's to the client's protection that I have them. Yet they're not listed anywhere in the adjuster's reports. Not only do I have to have these, but there's admin time included for me to go get these. Many times the adjusters won't include admin time. They may say, well, the job is too small to have admin time. Well, a great question to turn around and ask the adjuster is, do you get paid to do your paperwork? Or, when you go back to your office and fill these out, are you being paid? So when I go back to my office and I have to fill out all this paperwork, when I go back to my office and fill out the permit fees, complete this project, I need to get paid for this too. That's reasonable. That's absolutely reasonable. Once again, saying this in front of the client. You're going to find that when you're doing this, the client is going to be buying on to you. Hey, I want my home to be legal. Yeah, this guy should get paid because it's not as much of the client's money, right? And they're going to be more willing and more freely to get the best of the best out of the insurance adjuster, to get that money from the insurance company rather than feel like they're struggling to pay you. Questions or comments on that so far? All right, we look at this top highlighted line here. And this particular project that we're looking at was indeed flood damage. I think this particular, it wasn't Helene, obviously, this is too old, but he had his French drains around the house clogged and it flooded, standing water in his finished basement, partial daylight basement. So he had to get everything gutted down there. There was wiring damage, there was mechanical damage, all these things were happening down there. Not to mention flooring, drywall, painting, insulation. It was all heavily damaged down there. So he had to have all these trades come in. Well, notice at the top, these are estimate totals. They talk about what they're going to pay us, the general contractor. First of all, no permit fees, right? We can all agree to that. No admin time to go get my permit fees. Now, they're excluding the payout to me, the general contractor, of the trade's overhead and profit. First of all, I don't have any idea what my trades are making. I don't know what the markup is for my drywall guy. I don't know what the markup is for my electrician. I have no idea. Yet the insurance adjuster claims he does or she does. First of all, we don't. We have no idea what they're making. But they're taking out those trades' presumed overhead and profit from what they pay us. Okay, let's put the brakes on for a second. Right? First of all, can the homeowner pay the electrician directly? Can the homeowner pay the drywall company directly? Absolutely not. That would be a violation of general contracting. Everything has to go through you, period, bottom end. All the money comes in through me, all the money goes out from me, right? It has to, that's the law. I have to manage the entirety of the job. So we're talking about this. That's one of the things I'm going to say, wait a minute, I don't know what they're making or not making, and you're going to have to pay me all of it because I have to pay them. Yep. Questions? Comments on anything so far? Having this discussion with...
Good, Ben. How you doing?
Having this discussion with both the adjuster and the client. And if it's a husband and wife, get both of them at the table, right? Get both of them at the table with the adjuster so they can hear you talk about this with them so the adjuster can hear it. Hey, man, and that's really how I would do it. I wouldn't even be talking to the adjuster as much. I would just be explaining this to the client. Hey, listen, I've got to do this. We have to have these permits, you guys. You got to deal with the adjuster on getting these paid for because I have to bill for them. It's the law. I can lose my license if I don't. Bottom line, when all these trades can work for me, I have to manage their work. If they make a mistake, I'm paying for that out of pocket, right? That could go against my profitability. So I am managing them. I'm overseeing them. I'm the one making sure that the building materials are on the job site. That's real admin time. It's real costs. Who pays for workers' compensation here? If they don't have it, we have to provide it. State law, bottom line. So I'm doing additional admin work. I'm getting that COI. We should all be familiar with the COIs. They're out there every day. We're dealing with them all the time. But we needed an updated COI from these folks. If there are subs anyway, it still counts, right? We're still doing that admin work. We're still tracking it. We're still keeping up with it. We have to make sure they have that workers' comp by state law. If we don't, we get hit with it. We have to make sure they have the liability insurance, right? That umbrella coverage. We're tracking all of that for the homeowner's safety. We track that for the homeowner's safety and to abide by state law. So you can't take out the overhead and profit from what you're paying me. I'm spending real time managing this job. I'm spending real time making sure that they have proper insurance coverage. I'm following with the permits. I'm coming out there, I'm doing inspections every time the work is done to make sure it's meeting quality standards. So you are working through this entirely. Questions or comments? Okay.
We have one from Battleground Builders. Is it okay for the client to have the remediation work done themselves before we start our contract with them, so they pay the remediation company?
You know, that's a great question, and absolutely. You can absolutely have the ServPro type companies out there to do the remediation and get it dried out, and then you come in later. In fact, that could be, for most of us, advantageous because they can make sure that that moisture content is brought down. You do want to ask these folks for their moisture log. They should have a moisture content log.
Hey, Jeff, for the recording's sake, would you just repeat that question? It was hard to hear.
Sure. So there was the question of, is it okay to have a remediation company do the dry out and then a contractor come in after the fact and do the repair? And yes, for us, for most of us, having a remediation do the dry out before we come in can be advantageous for us. You do want to make sure that you get their moisture log, their dry out log, which they will have. They're going to have it because they're charging per day, per piece of equipment per day. Excuse me, guys. They're charging per piece of equipment per day to dry that out. So they will have moisture logs. You want a copy of those. Ask for a copy of the moisture logs. Put on file. That's part of your civil protection later on. If mold or mildew pops back up, you can point the finger back at the remediation company. You remove yourself from the liability of that. You've got the dry time logs. You can take it back. Hey, man, your remediation company said they dried it out. This is the documentation they gave me for that. So if you've got mold in it, it's not my problem. That was a great question, by the way. Other questions? All right, moving on down this list. Again, they're giving you 10% overhead and 10% profit. Once again, they don't know what you're marking things up. And they shouldn't really need to know that. The vast majority of these adjuster reports are going to come out as a line item report. They're going to come out as a line item report. The adjusters do not have to give a line item adjustment report. They have the ability to do a bid adjustment, a single bid adjustment. Ask for that. Ask for that single bid adjustment. The line item adjustment is going to be really difficult for you to deal with. For instance, they're going to go in and measure out the exact lineage of the baseboard. And then they're going to put a number on that exact lineage of the baseboard. What about waste? I can't go out and buy baseboard the exact length that we need to replace. I'm going to have waste. I have to have waste. So if you start dealing with these line items, they're not going to be paying you enough for the material. Once again, you want to talk about this in front of the homeowner and the adjuster both. Hey, I'm going to have waste. You know, I can only buy baseboard in 12-foot and 16-foot sections. But, you know, if it's not an exact dividend of these measurements, I'm going to have leftovers, right? I have to cut the drywall so it breaks on the stud. I'm going to have waste. It's inevitable. And I need to be paid for that because I'm going to have to buy it. So the line item adjuster reports are going to be very difficult for you to compete on. A bid adjuster's report is going to be much easier. Now, they're going to be very resistant to give this to you. Ultimately, it's not your job to insist on it. This is the homeowner's job. It's the homeowner's job to negotiate with the adjuster. It's not your job. Don't follow that. Don't get caught up in that rabbit trail. Don't argue with the adjuster. Your contract needs to be with the client. Your payment terms needs to be with the client. It's okay to have your regular contract, your regular deposit. You simply want to help equip the client to negotiate with the adjuster. You want to have this conversation in front of the adjuster so the adjuster can hear what you're telling the client, and it becomes much harder for anything to be twisted intentionally or unintentionally. Questions on anything else so far? Okay, let's scroll down to the bottom of this and zoom in on items excluded from contractor overhead and profit. All right, in this case, if you're not doing the remediation, the general cleaning doesn't apply to you. But if you are doing the remediation, then why, and I'm hiring you, so it's perfectly okay for you to hire a remediation company to come in and do the dry out. You don't have all the fans, you don't have all the dehumidifiers. You can hire the remediation company. You can do that. And when you do that, you're going to mark up the cleaning, just like you normally would. Because once again, you're making sure that they have the workers' comp insurance, the liability insurance. You're tracking all of that. Hey, folks, if the cleanup alone is $40,000 or more, that remediation company is required to be a licensed general contractor, and they are required to get building permits, even if it's two separate contracts. Even if it's two separate contracts, they have to be a licensed general contractor, and they have to pull permits just for cleanup. If that cleanup hits $40,000, they've got to do it. So if you're coming in after the fact, those are good questions to ask. What was the cost of the cleanup? You need documentation to say, we didn't do that. We couldn't find the permits. We don't know if they were licensed. And have a waiver for everybody to sign releasing you from any of that. Questions? All right, so if you're doing the cleaning, you're going to mark this up, even if you're hiring another company. Same premise, right? Same topic. We don't need to rehash that too much. But now we're moving down into mechanical and electrical on this particular job. Mechanical and electrical. Why is that? Why is that taken out of my overhead and profit? Can the electrician get a permit on this job without you? Everything falls underneath the general contractor's license. Even in these crazy counties like Mecklenburg County, who are blatantly violating the law, telling these electricians, plumbers, mechanical folks that they get a different permit number. By the way, Ryan Cody is on board with fighting this with us, the new director of the licensing board. So we're trying to figure out how to get this actually enforced through these variety of counties that are breaking the law. But nonetheless, if they don't get a general contractor's license on the line first, these other trades cannot get the work. They can't get a permit. The permit is tied to your permit. The permit is listed underneath you. I'll never forget that I was turning a basement into an apartment for a guy out here in West Asheville, and I called in for my electrical inspection, and the Buncombe County inspector came out there, and there was some mistakes with the wiring, and I should have caught it. I'm the general contractor, right? And the first thing the inspector said to me is, he said, "Jeff, you have wasted my time. You should have looked at this before you called me. These are things that you should have known as the general contractor, and you didn't do it. You've wasted my time." And damn it, he was absolutely right. I should have done it. I'm supposed to pre-inspect that work before I schedule the inspector. By the way, House Bill 488 made some changes in 160D, 110, C and D that says the general contractor is allowed to call in all of the inspections. You have the ability, the legal right, to call in all of your inspections regardless of what Madison County is telling you. I've reported Madison County before, and I've gotten Madison County in trouble. That made it a little harder for me to do work there in the future, but they're breaking the law. And they've been called out by NCDOI. So just to be clear that when we're looking at this and they're taking off the mechanical contractors, the electrical contractor, or the plumbing contractor, they're taking them out of my profit and overhead. That is a violation of general contracting law. It's a violation of contracting law because by that same law, I am required to superintend and manage the entirety of the job. So absolutely, these guys can't even show up on the job site, particularly in Asheville and Buncombe County, because they really are listed on my permits here. Madison County, a little bit harder to deal with. But here locally, super locally, absolutely, man, they can't even show up there unless I pull the permit. So absolutely, I'm going to mark their stuff up. Questions or comments on any of that?
Can you say that House Bill 48 law again?
Say again?
Can you list off what the House Bill 48?
House Bill, yeah, we can actually give you a handout for that. House Bill 488, 160D, 110, that has multiple sections underneath it, but 160D, 110, that law says, and this went into place October 1st last year, and that law specifically says that a local government cannot require more than one building permit per residential job. They cannot require more than one building permit per residential job, and they may not override that law. They may not override that law. It's really clear. It's black and white. One permit per residential job, provided that you are starting all the work together. So I can, quite literally and legally, build a single family house with a detached garage with an apartment above it, under one building permit, provided it's all on my original contract and I'm starting for the work at the same time. That doesn't mean I have to start building the garage at the same time I build the house. I could build the entire house, finish it, get a CO, and then move directly into the garage with an apartment above it. One building permit. And a local government may not override that law. I think we can stop sharing the screen right now, Adam. And in that 160D, 110, it's like D, C, and B down in there. The permit holder, this is a quote, the permit holder can request all inspections. So there's only one permit per job. General contractor gets it. General contractor can call in all the inspections. I've had a great conversation with Ryan Cody, the new director of the licensing board, just before Helene went through, and he said, Jeff, you're absolutely right. The licensing board is interpreting the law the exact same way you are, and he's working to make these, to get DOI on board. And to be truthful, he wasn't even aware, Ryan wasn't even aware that folks like Mecklenburg County and Madison County are pulling these shenanigans. Ryan didn't even know this was happening. So I have had this conversation with David Rutlinger, head of DOI Building Code. David Rutlinger has also said on camera, recorded interview, that yeah, we should be calling in all of these inspections. He kind of backtracked a little bit, which I'm hoping Ryan Cody can get David Rutlinger back where he needs to be. But the law is pretty clear. The legislators intended for this to happen, and the state association did a great job getting this into that law. Are there other questions? Once again, it very clearly says a local government may not override the law. We're seeing that happen more and more and more with legislation that is coming out. Because what's going on is these folks like Mecklenburg County is saying, yeah, but we're going to make our laws stricter. Nope, can't do it, specifically forbidden. Other questions? All right, we tried to give you the easiest highlights. These things can get very technical, very, very fast. We wanted to make sure you guys knew the basic talking points to equip the client to negotiate with the adjuster, right? Don't get in the middle of that negotiation. You're just going to get yourself in trouble. You're just going to make it very difficult. I don't give my estimates to the insurance adjuster. I made that mistake one time of giving a line item estimate to an insurance adjuster. You do not have to do that.
We have a question from Carrie Morash. Can you go into the bidded adjuster's reports process and how that looks?
So they're going to be doing all of that through Xactimate, and no, I can't. I don't have access to that, so I'm sorry. I can't do that. But they can give it as just a one lump sum carry. Yeah. Other questions? That's a great question. I'm sorry I can't provide that for you. All right, do make sure that you, when you have these discussions, have the adjuster present. Require a meeting with everybody.
does that imply that the homeowner needs 3 quotes or something?
No, that's, the adjuster may say that, but that is not, unless it's in their policy, okay, let's go back to this. Unless it's in their policy, no, that is not a requirement. No, that is not a requirement. Always refer to the policy. Now remember, you guys, insurance agents are licensed, insurance adjusters are licensed, and then we are licensed. Unfortunately, none of these overlap like they should, right? The adjusters may not even know that you have to get a permit and that you can lose your license if you don't. They literally might not even know that because they just know what it takes to do their license. The insurance agent is going to know what the policy says. We can read the policy, but it would be illegal for you to interpret the policy. So does the policy say 3 bids are required? That's the question I would pose to the client and the adjuster. If the adjuster's saying, well, you got to get 3 bids on this, I would sit down with the client and say, if I were you, I would ask where it says that in my policy. Where does it state that in my policy? And the adjuster would say, well, it doesn't say that. That's just our company policy. Well, if it doesn't say it in the actual policy, it doesn't count. So anytime they're trying to give you a standard or saying this is how it works, you can immediately go back and say, hey, homeowner, Mr. or Mrs. Homeowner, ask where it says that in your policy. Ask where that is a requirement in your policy, because if it's not a requirement in your policy, it doesn't exist. I'm just here to help you, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. That's all I'm here for. I want to make sure you're safe, you get quality work, you get work that is legal. If you don't get building permits and you try to sell the house later, you may not be able to sell the house. It could come back later on you. I'm just trying to protect you and help you. Other questions? And that, again, another really good question.
Hey, Jeff, it's James Carr.
Hey, James.
Hey, I have I'm sure other people do too, house in Swannanoa, 6 feet of water in it, fully submerged. The adjuster at this point is saying they don't want to replace the structural OSB sheathing on the home. When I look at the FEMA guidelines for what should be replaced, FEMA is specifically saying the OSB, if it's saturated, needs to be removed. Any guidance on how I coach my homeowners on having that argument with the insurance company? Because clearly, if I need to remove the structural sheathing, I've got to take all the siding off. I've got to take the windows out. We're stripping this thing completely to the studs on the outside of the building.
Yeah, James, I would, if it were me, what I would do is I would have a copy of that FEMA statement. And, obviously we can look at it. We can talk about that sheathing is a structural component, because it is, right? Sheathing is structural. And sheathing is held together by, OSB, right? Oriented strand board. So it's held together by glue and wood chips. And if it delaminates, you lose your structural integrity. And it is building code that we have to have that structural integrity. So I would pull up the building code side of that OSB is a structural part. And then I would pull up the FEMA document. And again, James, this is one of those things where I would not be telling the homeowner. I would be calling that meeting with the adjuster and the homeowner. And I would be putting that information to the homeowner in front of the adjuster. Literally. Like, here's a copy of this, and here's where you can find it online. And here's a copy of the building code, and here's where you can find it online. Talk to this guy, or talk to this him or her, he or she, and ask them why they're not wanting to keep your home safe. Why don't they want your home to be built back to code? I would use those types of questions. It's not going to, and ultimately, James, let's say that you don't replace the sheathing and that house collapses in high wind or another hurricane and kills everybody. And I wouldn't be afraid to throw this out there. Remember, you will face the criminal and civil charges, not the insurance company. That whole family dies, you can be charged with wrongful death because the house didn't have structural integrity. So I would pull up all of those and talk about all of that information, and always go back to, I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to make sure your home is built to code so that you will be safe. Have that conversation. It's critically important. to have the conversation with the homeowner and the adjuster. Insist on it. Insist on it. Otherwise, the adjuster will continue to manipulate the homeowner, intentionally or unintentionally, right? They'll continue to manipulate him to believe that you are wrong. And that's another good question. Anybody else? We're coming up right about an hour here. You guys do have the handout. I do want you to talk informed about the type of water it is, the type of damage it is, making sure that you do have those moisture meters or that you've had documented dry times. If you are doing the remediation yourself, you want to check the moisture every day and track it in a log. Keep that log. That's liability type information. If some other company has done it and you're coming in now, make sure you get those logs. Always have a meeting with the adjuster and the client. I would never talk directly to the adjuster. I did that one time. I'll never do it again, right? All I did was really complicate things and hurt myself. And I ended up getting the client really angry with me because the client was convinced I was lying to them and trying to rip them off. So I would never do that, right? Your contract is with the client. Make sure the client understands that regardless of the payout, you're going to get paid, regardless if the insurance company pays or not. Make that really clear. You're going to get paid no matter what, but you're here to help them through the process and help them advocate for themselves. If you encounter continued problems, there are private adjusters out there, so you can encourage your client to get a private adjuster. And these private adjusters do exactly that. They come and say, hey, your insurance company, XYZ insurance company gave you this. This is what their adjuster said. The private adjuster is going to be working for you, the homeowner, right? The private adjuster is working for the homeowner. They can come up using the exact same software. They know all the exact same strategies, and they can come up with a more accurate adjustment.
We do have a question. How do you have a meeting with the adjuster when they have moved to Florida?
Zoom. I would call everybody in on a Zoom.
Do you record that call?
I would absolutely record that call. Yeah, I wouldn't record it if I was at their kitchen table other than notes, right? And good documentation. If I had a meeting with a homeowner, just like most of you are already doing, I would take notes at that, and then I would email a summary of our meeting back to the client. I think pretty much everybody's doing that in some form or fashion already, but I would do the same type practice. Hey, we had this meeting, this is what we talked about. I would record the Zoom meeting, and remember, your meeting isn't with the adjuster, right? Your meeting is with the homeowner with the adjuster present. That's what you want to have happen. Require that adjuster to be there, though. So the adjuster can answer these questions about where's my permit fees? The mechanical contractor can't work without me. What about the structural integrity that's in the building code? I don't want this house to collapse on anybody. Other questions or comments? I do hope this has been helpful. Go ahead.
Two more. One from Nick. What kinds of contract structures would you recommend on these kinds of projects? Is there specific verbiage that should be used? I'm not an attorney, I'm not an adjuster, I'm not an agent. I would use my standard contracts, even if it's a time plus. If it's remediated and it's all clear and gutted, go with that. If you normally do fixed bids, go with that. I wouldn't worry too much about changing your contracts or your bid process. You can adhere to most of that, right? You can be a little more lenient if you want to with some of it, but mostly you can adhere to your regular contracts. Me personally, I would not recommend falling victim of, I'm going to have a special contract for these jobs, because you're going to open yourself up to too much liability. It's just not worth it. We all know it's better not to take the job than to get screwed over by the job, right? Another question? Another question from Modern Mountain Builders. We heard it was illegal to charge contractor fees on remediation services. Is this true?
No, that's totally not true. Absolutely, positively not true. No. And if you're doing it, it's part of your contract, and it falls right back into that entire law.
You're being paid to manage and superintend. I use those words, manage and superintend, because they're in the law, they're in the legislation that requires a general contractor. You can absolutely charge all of your admin fees. You can charge everything. It's absolutely, that is totally untrue. Other questions? All right, so if you want to watch Patrick's interview, you can sign in or go to our website, clearntraining.com, go to the videos, the video library. It is password protected, but the password is my name, Jeff Makey. Just like you would write it out in an email, capital J, space between the first and last name, and then M-A-K-E-Y, Jeff Makey. It's listed on the website that my name is, easy enough to find, but you can watch the water restoration video with Patrick. It goes into a lot more detail about dry times, dry standards, equipment, all of that is covered. We do talk more about the insurance broker stuff, and we are offering this class October 27th, I think. 24th, October 24th.
Kevin Griffin, what is your recommendation for change orders?
I mean, we all have different standards for change orders. I know what mine are. When, it's in our contract, or was, I don't practice general contracting any longer, but it was that a change order, if they initiated the change order, there was a fee. We always did that because we had a set bid before we got started. And so if they initiated the change order, there was a fee. If we initiated it, there was no fee. But either way, we had a list of what the change order was, why it happened. An example of us doing it, hey, we found structural rot that we didn't think would be there. So we're initiating the change order. If they initiate it and say, hey, we want to change the design or upgrade the fixtures, then hey, you're changing the change order, there's a fee. But whatever your normal change order fees are, or however you do that process, can stay the same. Anything else, you guys? I hope that was helpful. Some people are already taking off.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate you taking the time to go through those things. This was recorded, as we stated before, so we'll be sending out the recording. Jeff, would you mind if I included kind of that tree of how to find the video in that email to everyone too? So that they
Absolutely. Please do. Yep, absolutely.
In case you didn't follow that train of thought, we'll include that in the email as well. That's easy to find. The handout again, in case you didn't get it and you signed up after I'd already sent it. Is there anything else for the good of the group? If not, thank you so much, Jeff, for taking your time. Thank you all for attending. When you receive those emails, if you have other ideas for classes that would be helpful, we'd be happy to help facilitate them. I know there's a lot of education going on right now, so feel free to shoot me a response on that email and we will see what we can get cooking. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
If there's nothing else, thanks everybody.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Just to follow, sorry, Kevin Griffin here with Scroggs Construction. Just to follow up about the change order. What if it's something that the adjuster has missed as you're getting into the remediation?
Supplemental repairs and while we were in progress.
Gosh, Kevin, I would treat that, for me personally, I would treat that as a change order that I've initiated, and I would just go back and communicate. I would insist on that meeting. I would insist on the meeting with the adjuster and the homeowner at the same time. I would insist on it and say, you've missed this. We found it. Here's the documentation. Here's the building code, and present it to the client with the adjuster present, and then let the client handle that. Because ultimately, it's their job to get the money from the insurance company. It's not yours.
Jeff, we definitely appreciate what you've done this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. I think that's Matt. I think I recognized your voice, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right, anything else from anybody else? All right, right on. Thanks, everybody.